The time is exactly 9:42 a.m. This is News and Views. We're moving along, and our next guest is author and former member of the Executive Council for Roads and Transport in the Gauteng Provincial Government, and that, of course, is you, Dr. Ismail Vadi. Lovely to have you on the show. Assalamu alaikum to you. Welcome. You are going to be sharing history with us this morning, history pertaining to the Indian community of the Greater Gauteng area, but the changes that have taken place from, I guess, way back in the mid-50s. Welcome.
How are you?
I'm good. Thanks. Lovely to be talking with you on the show today.
Good. Looking forward to it.
So we talk about, I was quite surprised when I came across this piece. I couldn't believe that we're talking 70 years of existence of a township called Lenasia, or popularly known amongst our people as Lens. How long have you been in the community, and why is this so close to your heart?
So this is I think the 59th year that I'll be in Lenasia.
Wow.
So the better part of my life has been spent in this community. And it has evolved over time. As you indicated, Lens was established in 1955. And in those early years, there wasn't much in the way of housing. In fact, the first 50 or 100 families that were resettled here, largely as a result of the Group Areas Act, they had to stay in the military barracks. So on the western front of Lenasia, there's a very big military base, and some of those compounds or barracks were used to house the first grouping of people who have been resettled, largely from Vredendorp, Fordsburg, Sophiatown. Those were people who were now going to be forcefully moved out because of the Group Areas Act. The apartheid government, the National Party, didn't want mixed communities or non-racial communities. And in terms of the apartheid plan, each racial group had to be resident in its own particular area. So 1955, Lenasia was identified as the area for Indian resettlement.
I remember my mom and granny and aunts at the time were very against this forced resettlement. It was doom and gloom as far as they were concerned. We were also told at the time that it was a very barren, infrastructure was minimal. I think probably in the mid-60s, you could start, seeing perhaps little stores springing up, etc., and then one or two schools going up as well. But as far as the elders were concerned at that time, they were very resistant to this move. What made you and your family decide those many years ago that this is our fate, we have to move on, we have to go, we have no option? And were you victims of forced removals? Because a lot of that did happen in Fordsburg and Fitas and those type of areas. And then adding to that question, Dr. Vadi, is also, I'm trying to imagine if we didn't have this imposed on us way back 70 years ago, what would the condition and situation have been like, or what do you believe our living conditions would be like currently if there were no forced removals? How different would Gauteng or Johannesburg as a whole be looking today?
Yeah, so when the Group Areas Act was passed in 1950, the National Party government really struggled to get it implemented. In fact, the late Maulvi Kachalia and the late Justice Ismail Muhammad were really the key people instrumental in legally challenging the implementation of the Group Areas Act. They found every loophole in the Act and went to court. It is said that the Group Areas Act is the most amended piece of legislation in this country, in the history of this country. So basically from 1950, when the Act was passed, right up to 1960, although it was on the statute book, it actually couldn't be implemented because there were constant legal challenges. But the government then said, look, we've got to start moving. And the first big move came in 1953, when thousands of African people were forcefully moved out of Sophiatown. I mean, the army just pulled in, loaded people up, loaded up their furniture, and shoved them to Soweto. And although the ANC at the time opposed the move to Town, but the military might of the apartheid state basically crushed that resistance, and people accepted their fate. So, with regards to the Indian community, yes, they were living in, as I said, Friederdorp, Forsberg, Town, Kliptown, etc. But in many of these areas, there was a massive housing crisis, shortage of housing. People were living in back rooms. And myself, I mean, we in Kliptown, we lived in a zinc house. And then my mom and dad separated, and we then moved to Friederdorp. And there too, we were renting a house which was really a zinc house. You can't believe it today when we tell our children that they can't conceive what we're talking about.
And
And
not forgetting, Dr. Vadi, not forgetting the extended family situation back then due to the housing crisis. So you had multiple families living in one small little abode. And that
exactly,
too came along with its social challenges, huge social challenges.
yeah. So we had these extended families, quite cramped up. Friederdorp is a good example. The family, if it's slightly wealthy off, they would have had a shop in front and the house at the back. And every time a son or daughter got married, there was no house. So, you basically created a small room for the new couple, and that's where they live. And when they had children, well, they set with another problem. So in our case, because I mean, we had come from a broken home. My mom was not educated. She had come from India. So, when the opportunity of Lenasia came, she said that, look, at least we'll get a house in Gravel. This is what we could afford. It was a rental scheme for 30 years. And we moved in. We had no ceiling, we had no electricity, the roads were untarred. There might have been 3 or 4 shops at that stage. So we're looking at 1965, 1966. But those that had come a few years before, the only thing they had in the way of public facilities, public infrastructure was the railway line, the Lands railway station, and Lenasia Secondary School, which the apartheid government had built and opened in February 1955. So a few days ago, I was speaking to Alan Munsami. People will know him, a very prominent soccer player from the Bluebells United Football Club. He says when they first moved in, his uncle, in order to buy groceries, etc., there was no shops in Lens. He used to cycle to Midway because that's where there were some shops, buy his things for the family, the extended family, and then cycle back. But by the mid sort of 1960s, I think more people had started coming in. And then the normal needs, I mean, the apartheid government basically dumped us here. They established the schools, so it was Lens High and Nirvana later on, and then First Primary and Model Primary School. So those were the first 2 primary and high schools. And then it behoved really some 1 or 2 wealthier people to start setting up a few shops. And that's what's Lens. Nothing in the way of sporting facilities. All that came much later. But we made a life out of it. And today, we have so many mosques, temples, churches, all built by the community. Many of the non-governmental organizations and, like just Johannesburg Institute of Social Services, all of those things were financed really by the community. People gave donations and created institutions for the welfare of the community as a safety net. So from the in a sense from a forced removal situation, where the apartheid government had virtually destroyed settled communities who were there for decades, and dumped them into these new areas, the community has bounced back. Its resilience, I think, has become evident. And people made a life out of it. A new identity was created. So when went to school, I went to an Indian primary school, an Indian high school. And eventually, when I had to go to university, I had to go to University of Durban Westwood, which was an Indian only university. And if you wanted to go to Wits, you had to apply for ministerial permission. So out of this sort of group areas, racial mentality, a completely new community was born. When we moved into Greyville, we didn't know any of our neighbors. But in
Mm-hmm.
a short while, we played on the streets, we made friends, and very intimate bonds of friendship and neighborliness was created. because all of us were poor. I mean, we sort of, had built solidarity networks. And if you needed a tomato or an onion, you'll go next door and get it from the auntie next door, and you'll give it back later in the week when you have an opportunity to buy something.
And sad to say, that type of interaction with neighbors and children playing on the streets have all but vanished because a lot of people have moved into the suburbs. The people that can afford to move to the suburbs has also changed the face of Lenasia. But I'm going to talk to you about all of that and much, much more. And does gentrification come into the mix here or not, regarding the changing face of Lenasia? All of that and more after the ad break. Please do stay with us.
Captivate. Nothing less than a masterpiece. Droplets of gold inspires precious design. Platinum bursts with intricate freshness, and every pure diamond becomes more than just a girl's best friend. Vadi Gold Gem Jewelers, where timeless dreams become a reality. Come to us. We tailor-make designer gold, platinum, and diamond jewelry. Trade in or remodel your old gold. Clad yourself with classy name-branded watches. We offer insurance valuation and freezer card calculation. Visit us at 534 Ridge Road, Overport, or call 031 208 9142. Vadi Gold Gem Jewelers, manufacturers of fine gold and diamond jewelry.
When the perfect blend of stylish decor, exquisite halal cuisine, and warm hospitality come together, it could only mean Albeit Lodge, your true home away from home. Albeit is the ideal heaven for families, business people, and tourists with its 4-star family rooms and other luxurious facilities. Conveniently situated close to Port Elizabeth Airport, the beach, and other amenities, your stay will be truly unforgettable, as you'll be taking home lasting memories of the warm hospitality, the serenity and tranquility that Albeit has to offer. For reservations, call 041 583 6415 or visit www.albeitlodge.co.za.
Africa Muslims Agency has been providing critical aid in Gaza and Lebanon with your support. The humanitarian situation is more dire than ever before, with thousands displaced and in need of basic supplies to survive. Donate any amount to bring food, water, medical assistance, and essentials to the people of Gaza and Lebanon. Africa Muslims Agency, empowering, educating, inspiring.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042 203 1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
Searching for elite local and international investment and advisory services from an award-winning firm? Look no further than the Belmont Meyer Group, your gateway to unparalleled investment and wealth management. At Belmont Meyer, we believe in the art of wealth creation, a meticulous process fueled by our unwavering commitment to excellence. With a focus on providing elite alternative investments and quality advice, we also pride ourselves on maximizing value for our esteemed investors, as seen through our consistent outperformance. Your financial success is our top priority. Join us at Belmont Meyer and experience the difference firsthand. Ready to embark on a journey of greatness? Contact us today. Reach out to the Belmont Meyer Group on 078 786 1698. Call or WhatsApp or email us at info@belmontmayer.com. Elevate your financial future with Belmont Meyer, where every detail matters.
Connect and stay ahead with Salam Media. This is Salam Media coming to you live from South Africa.
Welcome back. Our esteemed guest this morning is author and a former member of the Executive Council of for Roads and Transport in the Gauteng Provincial Government, and that, of course, is you, Dr. Ismail Vadi. We're talking about celebrating 70 years of Lenasia. Back to you, and would you like to respond to the question I put to you before the ad break?
Just remind me of the question, please.
Okay, I'm kind of wondering, 70 years of Lenasia, wondered if we weren't the victims of forced removals, if there wasn't the apartheid system in place, how different would our lives have been? How different would Johannesburg be looking today? Keeping in mind that there was a housing crisis at the time. Do you think that we would have been in an ideal situation, or would we just like to wish that we would be in an ideal situation had it not been for apartheid? And the Apartheid-Era has really resulted in amazing leaders and strong people in our community, you being a perfect example of that as well.
Look, it's difficult to sort of, visualize what would have happened. I think, for the better part of the 1940s, 50s, and say 60s, the housing crisis would have remained. Like we have a urban housing crisis right now. I mean, all the informal settlements that you see around Lenasia and other communities is really a failure for government to begin to address the housing issue in an urban setting. So that would have been, the situation. Of course, I think any government then would have found means to rebuild or to build new suburbs, new communities, and new cities around central Johannesburg. Of course, those would, if we didn't have the apartheid system, those would have been non-racial communities in the main, and the trajectory of life would have been very, very different.
Absolutely.
We would have been in mixed communities, so in a strange way, in an ironic way sometimes, apartheid, by putting us in group areas, afforded the community an opportunity to maintain, say, religious identity, cultural identity based on ethnic identity or racial identity. And quite often people will say, well, look, we're Indian and somebody else is colored or African. But if we were living in a non-racial situation from the word go, I think those identities would not have been so pronounced. Although my guess is that there will be a natural affinity for people to express themselves culturally and religiously, even in mixed communities. So if I take today, say like a community like Greenside, it's quite non-racial. But the Greenside Mosque, for example, or the masjid there, has become a focal point for that community. And if you go there in Maghrib time or in the evenings, people come to the mosque. That's where they exchange news about who is ill, who passed away, whose son is getting married, etc. So there would always be, I think, cultural affinities, but society would have been very different. Of course, the apartheid system, as you indicated, bred a major struggle. And I mean, the national liberation struggle intensified in the 1950s. The congresses became mass movements. But then the government banned the ANC, and many leaders of the Indian Congress and the Colored People's Congress, others had gone into exile. And it was rebuilding a political movement. And we really saw that in the mid-1970s, more through the courage of students. The 1976 uprising transformed the political mood in the country. It raised international awareness of what was happening in the country. And then in the 1980s, as the apartheid government, it found that its systems were unsustainable, it started a gradual process of reforms. First with the South African Indian Council, and in the case of the colored community, it was the system of management committees or local affairs committees. And then in 1984, the tricameral parliament, for whites, coloreds, and Indians. And that provoked massive, resistance, massive boycott campaigns. And after that, once people appreciated that there were housing and educational opportunities, etc., but politically, the apartheid government was going nowhere. It was unsustainable. And because the struggle and the resistance had intensified to a point where, you had a government of the day, but de facto it wasn't able to rule and govern its people. And then the only alternative was to try and negotiate a settlement, which we all are aware of.
So 70 years is we're celebrating 70 years of Lenasia being in existence. Would you know offhand how many people are residing in Lenasia at this point in time? And then at the same time as well, from the dismantling of apartheid, I think a couple of years after that, in the early 90s, we started seeing lots of migration of people, lots of people who could afford to move to the suburbs, probably be closer to universities, good schools, better amenities, facilities, etc. So we saw this migration from not only in Asia, but townships, Black, Indian and coloured townships all around the country. That's created quite a change. But we're also seeing lots of African people now moving into the townships, the previously coloured and Indian townships. We're seeing a lot of African people moving in there. That comes with its own dynamic as well. Talk to us about all of that.
Yeah, so there are three trends that are visible at the moment, or identifiable. The first is that segments of the Indian middle class, and I would say that would be the same in former coloured areas, have moved or are moving into former white areas. So we're looking at areas like Greenside, Houghton. So that's the middle and upper middle classes. And if they can't physically relocate, then many of their children are going to what was former Model C schools. And it's a completely different experience. So that's the one trend. The second is that in the mid-1980s, as the United Democratic Front became quite a powerful player in the country and a resistance movement inside the country, a process of ungovernability emerged where the Black people in resistance could not overthrow the apartheid state, but the apartheid state could not defeat them politically and subdue them. And in this period, you found that people started taking initiative. They were really voting with their feet, occupying land illegally, etc. So in lands, for example, we had the Lenasia informal settlement emerging. I remember very clearly, 1986, 87, there might have been 25 families there. And a very prominent activist of our time, Bashir Lovgat, was the first to go and spend a night or two with them in those little shanties that they had built up. And
wow.
Amin Ekalwaya from The Indicator gave it quite a bit of coverage. But today, the Lenasia informal settlement, I would estimate, has got about 35,000 people. Sure. So it's almost a ward on its own. So right. Yeah, the demographics have completely changed. And then the third trend is really people coming from outside of South Africa, particularly from India, Pakistan, some parts of the Middle East, Bangladesh. I mean, they are here. Many of them are now here for 20 years, 25 years or longer. Their kids are going to school here. Many of them, if you go to Lenasia CBD, many of the shops are really on a rental scheme, and these foreigners, let's call them foreigners for now, are trading there. When I was a kid, I knew almost every shopkeeper in the Lenasia CBD. Today, when I walk around, I hardly know those people. Those are people who have come in a post-1994. And they constitute quite a significant part of the community now. If you go to many of the mosques here, or even in the country towns, say like Makopane, Port Kittises, etc., the old Port Kittises, in many of those institutions, when you go for the prayers, the majority of people there are actually what we call the recent immigrants into the country, the post-1994 people who come from Bangladesh. And they haven't fully integrated. I mean, they're staying here, they come to the masjid, etc. But as in terms of actual integration, I think there are some stresses and strains. So we've got to find a way of reorganizing our lives. I mean, the old Indian community had built many of these institutions in the community, such as I said, the Cancer Society, the Blind Society, the various cultural and religious institutions, etc. But then comes in 20, 30,000 African people who don't share the same culture and perhaps even religious values as the predominant community here. How do you integrate? So schools have desegregated. I mean, daily in Lenasia, we have, and when I tell people these figures, they get a bit astounded. We have about 900 taxis bringing in African students from neighboring informal settlements into Lenasia school. I mean, there's a traffic nightmare every day when the school starts in the mornings and in the afternoons. But if those learners were not coming to land schools would have to shut down, really, because many of the wealthier kids have moved out in the wealthier families. And the younger couples, I mean, they're professional, etc., they're all moving closer to their places of work, which is central Johannesburg. So there's a flight of people from, let's say, Indian people from this community, and others have come in, and they're keeping like the schooling system afloat in this community.
And the economy, of course, because that economy is turning, and I should imagine it's a vibrant economy in Lenasia.
It is. So, I mean, if you go to the Lenasia CBD, it's a strange phenomenon. The one section where the taxi rank is, where the Lenasia railway station is, and many of the businesses there's an like a flea market and informal trading taking place. That section is almost Africanized. And because of the petty crime situation, bag snatching, chain snatching, etc., people have just sort of, let's say Indian people have just stayed away from that part of the CBD. But if you come to where Signet Terrace is, closer to the residential areas, so you have a kind of ironic sense of apartheid even in the CBD. but it's a thriving CBD, I can tell you that.
Right.
Okay, the big malls are different. Tradewood Mall, Signet Terrace, that's very, very mixed. I mean, the clientele is completely non-racial. It's very busy. And then in the smaller shopping centers inside of the area, it's completely different. In the informal settlement, we've got all these small house shops. Again, here, many of them run by foreigners.
The spaza shops.
Yeah, mainly run by foreigners.
Right, let me come in here. Yeah.
And the issues of integration, I think, is one of our big challenges for the future.
Absolutely. That was exactly what I was going to come to. That is the all-important question. And I think if we don't start working and looking at ways of integrating, we're going to have very many future social problems between the different groupings of people. And that, I think, is going to be a huge challenge. You've given us such an interesting background, historical background of Lenasia, and I'm so pleased that you're sharing this with us. So going forward, when we look at 70 years of celebrating Lenasia, are there any plans to kind of get the community involved to celebrate the 70 years, given that a large number of the original inhabitants of Lenasia have moved out. A lot of the older generation has passed away. They've passed on. So what are the plans? Are you part of some little grouping of people that are going to celebrate the 70 years, or you're just putting it out there for people to realize this is where we're at? We're 70 years in existence, and are there future plans? What do they look like? And of course, the key word there is integration of the different racial communities within Lenasia.
So the Lenasia 70-year celebrations will be a year-long celebrations. There's a coordinating committee that I have convened. But the important thing is to make this a people's-driven exercise. So yes, the committee will organize a set of activities in the course of the year. But what is important is we want ordinary residents of the area, its institutions, etc., to find ways and means of actually celebrating. So in Lenasia, we have a set of normally, signature events like the Gandhi Walk, the Lenasia Fete, the Night Walk, the Lenasia Flea Market at night. We have a particular, in November, a very big flea market. So these big events, we'd like them to become part of the process of celebrating the 70 years. Then, for example, on the 8th of February and the weekend after that, the Lenasia School Sports Association, both the primary school and the high schools, have agreed that all sporting events for this, inter-primary, inter-high school sports will be designated as part of the Lenasia 70 celebrations. In the course of the mid-year, they'll have the big soccer and netball and those kinds of tournaments. So all their activities. I've had now calls from various religious institutions across the board, Muslim, Hindu, Tamil, Christian, who are saying that they would want to celebrate in their own way the 70 years, what are the formalities, what are the protocols. And we've just said, this is your community. Write up your own history. Popularize the idea that Lenasia is 70 years old. Many people don't know Lenasia is 70 years old. They think Lenasia started really in the 1960s, but it actually started in 1955. So just to recover that history. We are meeting with the Principals Forum, the Lenasia Principals Forum, quite soon to see how education, the fraternity can be involved, how schools could celebrate this. So Lenasia Secondary School, which is the oldest high school in Lens, was started, as I said, in 1955. On the 1st of February, they're going to be having an open day for their alumni, which is 70 years. Anybody from that school can come and visit. It's an all-day thing, and I'm sure they'll have activities and programs. So I think the interest is growing, and we're hoping that people will claim this. This is their community. It's not Vadi's event. This is the people's event. It's a community event, and I think we're in for quite an exciting, creative, innovative thing. Important thing is to make sure that we use these events not to reinforce old racial identities, but that we really use it to build and forge a new Lenasia community identity that cuts across race, ethnicity, language, etc.
So we're celebrating 70 years of Lenasia, but it is also the changing face of Lenasia, because that is exactly what it is. And this is, you can see this throughout all of the townships in South Africa. I suppose you go to Eldorado Park, if you go to Lodium, all of these townships, a similar trend is actually taking place. Exactly what's happening in Lenasia is playing out in all of these previous townships, Indian or coloured townships. But I just want to digress here, and I'm very interested in getting your views on this matter. I'm going to cross over to the Western Cape and talk about the tale of two cities there. I'm sure you have some very strong views on that matter. And the fact that often people complain in the in Cape Town proper, or rather in the coloured and Indian areas of the Western Cape, that the services being given to the people that inhabit the Atlantic seaboard, the uber rich, many of them are people from abroad, or people semigrating out of other areas of South Africa for a supposed better life, where services are really top of the class services are being offered to them, and it comes at a price, obviously. That dynamic is pretty dangerous, is it not? It's fine if you can afford millions and millions of rands buying premium property and living in a very classy suburb. But the impact on the working class people and the resentment that it's creating there, and the fact that they feel, the working class people feel, that land has been taken away from them, what probably would be rightfully theirs, and people are making millions and millions of profit being, with this land being sold to the uber rich. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so look, I mean, we've spoken about racial and ethnic identities and linguistic and cultural differences. But you've touched on an important point, and that is that we must be mindful of the fact that there are also class divisions in all of our communities. So we do have the very rich and the very poor. We have the working people. And, working people in the main are stuck where they were in the old Group Areas Act. Not many of them are moving. They're still here in lands and in other, communities and townships. So that's the first thing that we will have to begin to address is how do we get actual genuine economic upliftment, economic transformation and development. I think it remains a challenge. The Cape Town phenomenon is significantly different from ours. I mean, there, because of the political dynamics there, people, and the truth of the matter is that the DA administration, for the time that it's governing in that city, is doing a reasonably good job. You can't run away from that. So even in the last elections, I mean, as much as the Muslim people felt very strongly about the Palestinian cause, etc., the truth of the matter is that a good number of people from that community voted for the DA. So there is a perception of better governance and greater order and security in those communities. And yes, there is this semi-migration taking place, but also the Western Cape government and administration has really had a very proactive strategy to promote tourism and promote investment into that province and that city. And it does look like they are succeeding. But the reality is that the very rich are enjoying the total fruits of the changes in our society 30 or 35 years into the democracy. But the very poor and the ordinary working people are just where they are. So there is a housing crisis in Cape Town, and this occupation of land. Even if you go towards Burkap, you'll see that homeless communities have put up tents there, and living in the cities. It's part of the challenge and the internal contradictions that are there. The tragedy with us, and I mean, I say this as a former public representative of the ANC. I think the city of Johannesburg today has failed us. Previously, I think we had a city really on an upward path, growth path. Really, this idea of an African world-class city was gaining momentum I would say, in the first 5 or 10 years. But sadly, I think in the last 15 years or so, this city has just gone down to the point where, it's completely unstable. We've
Absolutely.
had 10 mayors in the last 6 to 7 years. Technically, many of the city, its entities, Joburg Water, Electricity, Johannesburg Roads Agency, I mean, they're failing our communities. Things are not really functional, and we're just seeing a degradation of our community.
Absolutely.
So
it is very sad.
We could have changed that. And the political instability here, the basically political parties and public representatives sort of playing musical chairs. Who will be the mayor? Who's going to come in? Who's going to be kicked out? That seems to be the preoccupation. But the citizens, the ordinary people in the city of Johannesburg, they're not really benefiting. So
sadly,
the 2026
sorry, I have to, Marv, for the interruption. I'm going to have to wrap up. It's just two very quick comments I'd like to make, and then I'll hand over to you just to wrap up on the 70 years of Lenasia. But thank you very much for allowing me to digress to the Cape Town situation. Very sadly, that situation has created housing totally out of the reach of ordinary Cape Townians because the pricing has gone through the roof. I mean, the prices can compare with housing prices or property prices in Europe. That is how crazy it has become. And thank you very much for being so very candid about the situation in Johannesburg and the city of Johannesburg. I do appreciate how candid you've been about that matter. To wrap up, let me hand over to you and the 70 years of Lenasia being in existence. I do hope we had more time, but we have now run out of time.
Thanks, Julie. Okay, so 2 points, really. This is a moment of celebration, and it is really the rich legacy that we have. The resilience is what needs to be celebrated, but we also have to keep our eye to the future to see how we can become our own agents for change. And the point I was making earlier on is that the 2026 local government election really affords ordinary residents the opportunity to begin to vote into power people that they think will do the best for their communities. And so we should not lose that opportunity, because it is about fixing up the city of Johannesburg, fixing up Lenasia, El Dorado Park, etc. And I think that power now rests in the hands of the people.
Dr. Ismail Vadi, author and former member of the Executive Council for Roads and Transport in the Gauteng Provincial Government, talking to us today about celebrating 70 years of Lenasia. As hardworking as he's always been, thank you indeed. We salute people like you that have the community at heart. Thank you so much for your time. All the very best. Till the next time, keep us in your du'as, and salamu alaikum to you.
Very much, really. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
And that's where we leave it, 10:23 exactly. Thank you for your company. From me till the next time, which is next Monday morning. Take care. Assalamu alaikum and Khuda Hafiz.